We're just launching into it because I'm terrible at introductions. Hello, thank you for joining us. Today I'm talking to Natasha. I'm so sorry, Natasha, I've forgotten your second name.
Sorry, I should have put it in there. It's Grover. It's Grover. Natasha Grover, yeah.
Natasha Grover and Kara Dansky. Kara, you will know from the times I've spoken to her before, but Natasha is a new face. We thought it would be a good idea to get together to talk about what happened recently at an extraordinary board meeting in the Loudoun County School Board. Can you, first of all, Natasha, can you give us a bit of background? Basically, what seems to have happened is that gender identity ideology seems to have been installed in the school despite the wishes of parents. Can you tell us a little bit about how you first came to notice that these ideas were entering the school?
I knew they were entering because I had been following what was going on in a neighboring county in Fairfax County. So anything that Fairfax County does, Loudoun County will follow suit eventually. They're right next door. Mm-hmm. And Fairfax is more ideologically, anyway. So we just... Anywho, so I knew this was happening probably 2018. And then by 2019, I was raising the alarm bells because they were trying to rush in this kind of like what they called an umbrella philosophy. It was policy 1040. And that was their whole non-discrimination policy, which always sounds really, really good, right?
They always do, yeah.
In there, they were going to, put in sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression. Who knows what that means, right? Mm. And so they were adding in all these things. And then I think there was maybe to try to protect for pregnancy status or whatever it was. But the point is, when that gender identity thing popped up, raised alarm bells for me big time. And so I started scrambling. I'm not a professional organizer. I was basically flying at the seat of my pants, got a petition started and got 1,500 signatures in about 2 weeks in order to present them to the school board and say, we don't want this language in the policy. They were really surprised by the outpouring of just kind of grassroots parents, just residents who were upset. They passed it anyway. There was a good amount of debate about it, but I forced it to be something that the Loudoun County Republicans had to talk about and had to deal with, because a lot of times they just don't want to touch that kind of stuff. They just wanted to talk about, traffic and tolls.
Yes,
they don't want to talk about the kind of, culture wars or whatever you want to call it. And I warned them in 2019, that this umbrella policy is just the beginning and that they're going to make comprehensive policies about bathroom access and athletic clubs and all that kind of stuff. It's coming, sexual education, what they call family life education over here. I said, it's coming, you guys, it's coming. And of course now, as Kara explained really well on her blog, that was excellent. Her recap of that. They put in that crazy, it was even more comprehensive and insane than what the Virginia Department of Education had put together. But I'm not surprised because we have a lot of radicals here in Loudoun that have I don't even want to say a lot. They're just really, really loud. So anyway.
Yeah, that seems to be the way all over.
So we had 4 hours of public comment on Tuesday. And then they said, well, we're going to postpone the vote to Wednesday. And then Wednesday I showed up and it was practically empty. And I just stood there with my sign because I'm the crazy sign lady. And they had their 2 hours of debate or whatever it was, or an hour of debate. And then, of course, they voted. And I knew how they were going to vote. It was predetermined. It's always predetermined. The idea that, and this is what I try to explain to people, the idea that you going and doing public comment is going to change minds, don't do that. It'll just kill your spirit, right?
Yeah.
You're doing it because you're going to be streamed live throughout the county. The media might pick it up, and your kind of, backbones are contagious. So if you're out there doing it, then other people, you know what I'm saying? And you're normalizing speaking the truth. So anywho, sorry, I went off on a tangent.
No, that's great. Now, I should point out, Natasha, you're a Republican, and Kara, you're a Democrat. Are you a registered Democrat, Kara? or did you?
I am still a registered Democrat.
Well, that's impressive of you to still have faith in them. Cara, how did you get?
Have faith in them. That is not why.
No. Do not have faith in politicians.
Cara, how did you become aware of what was going on in Loudoun?
How did I become aware? Probably through talking with Natasha. And actually, the reason I became aware was because there was a meeting in June at which Natasha's daughter spoke up. And what she said, I'm paraphrasing, what her daughter said included the phrase, "Everyone knows what a boy is, even you," which is fantastic.
Brilliant.
And I read the fine print, and I read her name, and I read her last name, and I thought, is that Natasha's daughter? So I reached out, and yes, in fact, it was Natasha's daughter. So we got to talking about it, and Natasha suggested that I come to the August meeting, and I registered to do so. And then she very graciously invited me to attend a rally beforehand. So I've known about this probably since June.
Right. So let's talk about. Sorry, when did you go there, Cara? Was it Tuesday or Wednesday?
Tuesday.
Tuesday. Let's talk about Tuesday. What did you? I mean, the what you describe in your blog seems a very kind of strange security setup for a parents' meeting. Can you talk a little bit about that? Natasha, for instance, have you ever seen anything like this at the school before?
No. No. I walked up and I was like, what is this, the TSA? Because Loudoun County is super like hoity-toity. Like, you don't, like, what? We don't have, like, violence issues in Loudoun County. You know what I mean? Like, that it was total security theater. And, so I'm going to share this with you because I just got a little inside scoop yesterday. The sheriff's department was there, Cara, but they were, like, off in the wings or inside the building watching everything on a big screen, just waiting just in case that, like, the group is called Allied something. It was a private security firm in case they messed up and violated anyone's constitutional rights. Because originally, I think the state police and the sheriff's department had been asked by the school board and the superintendent to come and do, like, the security theater. And both organizations, like both their government entities, were like, nope, that's not our job. And so they went and hired these Humpty Dumpties with metal wands. And I mean, they were armed. I mean, they definitely had Glocks on their hips to wand us. We couldn't even bring in a purse, our wallets, you know what I mean? Like, unless you were carrying it in your hand or something. It was pretty.
And to give context for that, Natasha has been to several previous school board meetings.
All the time for years. We have never, ever had anything, never bags searched, never our bodies checked for things, forced to line up like that and only allowed in a little bit at a time. What happened on Tuesday has never, and Wednesday, I had to go through the same Humpty Dumpty process on Wednesday as well. Never. We have never had that. Brand new.
And Cara, how would you describe the mood there on the day?
Well, I didn't know what to expect because I had never been to a Loudoun County school board meeting, but it started when we arrived and pulled into the parking lot, and there seemed to be sort of roaming armed security guards roaming around the parking lot. And I didn't know whether that was strange or not because I'd never been there, but Natasha had never seen that before. And then he asked, so we pulled up and she rolled the window down and he asked a very strange question, which is, are you a member of the public? And she was like,
we all are.
We all are. We're all a member of the public. So it was odd. And we just kind of looked at each other like, what is going on? So we parked, and first we went to the area where people were assembling for the rally. And I would say the mood there was pretty upbeat. People had different booths to talk about different topics. And I was there, obviously, to talk about gender identity. So I met a few people. I handed out a couple flyers for the Women's Human Rights Campaign. People were very happy to see that. And the mood at that time seemed to be pretty upbeat. And I was interviewed by an ABC reporter. And then we had the rally. So things didn't start to get ominous until we started hearing about the rule changes. And when we started gathering near the entrance to the building. Would you say that's right, Natasha? Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I knew that they had posted, and they kept changing things. It was really annoying. And they would post them last minute on the website. And there was this long, like an essay of all this, how these policy changes and rule changes. And I was like, what? But then when you get up to the door, nothing makes sense. This person's shuffling you here, then this one wants you over here, standing over there. And
I would say, if I can just jump in, I would say it was worse than annoying, because it sort of had a feeling that they were trying to keep us on our toes.
Yeah.
We didn't know, at one point we were supposed to talk for a minute when we gave our testimony, and then we were going to talk for 2 minutes. And that was okay that they expanded our time, but then they were going to let in only 10 people,
right.
But they let in 20 people, and then it went back to 10, and they were going to pat us down and wand us. And I didn't know until the last minute about the purse thing. So we had to run back to the car to put the purses in the trunk of the car. And the whole thing had the feeling like they definitely wanted us to know who was in charge.
Oh, yeah.
They made the rule.
So intimidation, essentially. Intimidation.
Oh, yeah. Totally psychologically warping is what that whole thing was. It was just to demean us before we went up to stand before the board. So there was a lot of emotion from a lot of the speakers, and I wouldn't be surprised if part of that was from being treated like that ahead of time.
Yeah. So what do you think? Do you think also, actually, there's something that occurs to me, which is it's intimidation, but it's also that I would imagine that you have been described ahead of time to some of the participants there as a bunch of bigots. Would you say that might have something to do with it?
Oh, well, if you can hear my wild child in the background,
don't worry. It's a common occurrence on this part.
I told her to it's time to be quiet, which means she definitely elevates her voice. So we're a family of females that don't follow orders very well.
Okay, good.
So, I've been called all sorts of things. I don't know if you ever heard about, this was something that kicked off the school board petition recall that's going on in my county, right? So there's 6 out of the 9 school board members have recall petitions going on in order to get them before the circuit court judge and see if we can get them recalled and have a new election because of their dereliction of duty or whatever. Mm-hmm. So anywho, the reason they're being recalled is because they were part of a private secret Facebook group with parents and activists in Loudoun County called the anti-hate or something, LCPS parents, anti-racist, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And I don't know. We call them Chardonnay Antifa,
Right.
And so they had a hit list, hate list, I call it, was kind of being compiled of parents who were against critical race theory and against all sorts of stuff. And so, of course, my name was put on there. I mean, that was like rapid. I got a call from the sheriff's department about it because my name was on the list. I laughed about it, but because I've been called certified racist nut job. I have been called transphobic. I've been called homophobic. I mean, I had an article published. I sent it to the school board. It was about a story I had heard in January of 2019 from a lesbian girl who had graduated from Loudoun County Public Schools. And she had spoken before that, feminist group there in January in DC about her experience. And so I basically just regurgitated it. And I said, listen to this girl. She was totally brainwashed by this trans stuff and then dropped by her glitter family the minute she detransitioned. And I said, you need to listen to this. You shouldn't be promoting this. And I was still called homophobic. I'm like, okay. Yeah. So I've been labeled everything. I think that that's something that a lot of the Loudoun County parents are still having trouble stomaching. They're not used to being called a bigot. They're not used to, because they're not. They're not used to being called all these names, and it's freaking them out. So for me though, I don't know, it's been a lot.
Yeah, I think that's the aim, isn't it? It's just to try and make everything you say suspect, so that
they definitely set that stage where you had the trans activists that would come ahead and they will accuse Christians of being non-Christian and they're not following Jesus and how they're all bigots and don't listen to them. And these people who come up and speak, they're just full of hate. They already set that stage. Do you see what I'm saying? And the school board members do that too. Oh, when the school board members talk, they accuse us of hate and all sorts of stuff. Oh yeah.
Graham, something you may not know, and something that your viewers may not know, is part of the reason that people like Natasha and I just brush this off is because we, in October of 2019, we stood outside the United States Supreme Court to have a rally in favor of women's rights. And we stood on that stage. I was a co-MC of that rally. And I stood up there for about 3 or 4 hours. And there was a guy who was very angry at us. And he stood there with a bullhorn screaming, "Go home, homophobe," for the entire time. And the reason I want your viewers to know that is Linda Bellos was one of the women who spoke at that rally. She came here from the UK to speak at that rally, and they screamed at her, "Go home, homophobe," which is some of the most xenophobic, homophobic nonsense I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah. I mean,
old hat.
I mean, we've got both ends of the political spectrum here who both agree that gender ideology is a load of nonsense. And it's the same in the UK, except what they completely ignore in the UK is that over here, the fight against gender ideology is a left-wing phenomenon. It is left-wing women who are standing up. It is left-wing women who are saying no. And they are being smeared as bigots and homophobes, as you say, by left-wing men like Owen Jones and people like that. And it's working because you see other people regurgitating the idea that left-wing feminists over here are funded by right-wing money. There's no truth to it whatsoever. Every time there's a crowdfunder, the amount of people giving 20 quid at a time is just huge, and the crowdfunders make their target immediately. So it's fascinating to me that they are so desperate to paint this as a right-wing phenomenon, when, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, Natasha, I know that you and I probably differ on a few things. But the safety and security of young women, it's something that unites everybody.
It's common sense. It's just common humanity. You know what I mean?
I just find it so extraordinary that people can forget about women every time, that they can just completely ignore, like that. Even the sports thing blows me away that's gotten as far as it has, But anyway, sorry, that's not a question. Sometimes I just go off on one, excuse me. I will ask a question though. Why are Republicans, to me, every time I think about this issue, I think of it as an open goal for the right, in the sense that all Republicans have to do to point up how insane the left are at the moment is simply point to all this stuff. It is so self-evidently wrong. Why aren't they trying to make it more of an issue, would you say, Natasha?
Oh boy. Okay, so I'm a Republican because it's the only political party that even remotely espouses most of my views. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. It's just a tool to get what I want done.
Yes.
That being said, the Republican Party is actually really, really diverse, and there are factions and infighting. And what people seem to forget is that this gender stuff, which is permeated throughout social media. Okay. So if your kid's on Snapchat or Instagram or Tumblr or whatever, they're getting the glitter bombs constantly. So there are quite a few Republican families, and I'm going to tell you, conservative Republican families who've come to me and they're devastated because their children are doing the whole trans thing. Right. And so they have a hard time speaking out too much just because they don't want the spotlight on their children, and they don't want to, anyway. And so this trans thing is affecting everyone, and the fear that they might be responsible for suicides, that, self-harm, any of that kind of stuff, bullying, that sort of thing. Republicans, I would say most of them, like the vast, vast majority, are actually really, really like nice people, and they don't want to, and then that whole idea of big tent Republicanism, they want to welcome everybody, and they don't want to seem unwelcoming at all. And so I think when it comes to the culture wars, especially in Northern Virginia, which is kind of a liberal area, the Republicans don't really want to touch this kind of stuff. And so, why aren't Republicans jumping on it? Well, You know, a lot.
No, I think you've answered it. You know,
a lot.
No, I think you've answered it. Yeah, no, that makes
You know, and it's exhausting. And so they kind of depend on kind of grassroots people like me to be screaming all this stuff, because then they can just kind of let me push the Overton window, and they can kind of stay, like the politicians, I mean, they can kind of stay, and the candidates, they can stay sort of neutral, maybe.
Yes. It kind of reminds me a little bit of how the cameraman left the camera. Another strange thing happened at the meeting. Cara, can you describe what happened when someone stood up to oppose certain aspects of it and lay out the reasons why? A cameraman walked away from his camera. And it was just unrecorded.
Yeah, that's my understanding. One of the board members who was opposing the policy started saying some things that were really completely reasonable. You know, just saying, we haven't really fully explored this. You know, it's not time yet to be implementing this policy. We don't really know what the impacts are going to be. And the camera person, and I'm not remembering the outlet that it was, but the camera person just cut the mic and walked out of the room.
Wow, that's extraordinary. That's yeah. I think the other aspect to this that's interesting is that there are people in every walk of life who have swallowed the idea that any kind of pause put on this stuff is actually bigotry, and so they are what would you call it? I forget the word. Oh, bugger! You know, they're saboteurs. You know. Saboteurs. They're like individual saboteurs within everything, who are shutting things down, trying to stop people getting heard, walking away from the camera. You know, it just shows, I think, how far this ideology and this inability to hear the other side has just kind of poisoned a whole society.
I think that's right, and I think that some aspects of this whole topic are so unbelievable that it's hard for people to believe them because they're unbelievable. And I wonder if that plays into part of the reason why Republicans aren't better at fighting this politically, because when you tell people that there are, I mean, it's hard to say the words, there are male convicted rapists and murderers in women's prisons right now.
Yes.
Right? Because who on earth can believe that that's true, except that it is? Yeah. And, you know, we can't leave out the crucial role of the media in this. And I say that because there was a local Seattle radio station that broke a story in March of this year about 9 men being housed in the women's prison in Washington state. One of them had been convicted of murdering multiple women. One of them had been convicted of raping a 12-year-old girl, and they are being housed in the women's prison. And this was covered locally. Not a single national media outlet picked it up. And this ought to be a national scandal.
Yeah. Well, there was a woman who was set on fire in the street a few days ago in the UK, and it received barely any coverage. You know, it was an honor killing of some sort. So it's just, I don't know, it just seems like a kind of a unofficial conspiracy made up of loads of connected people who've all been told by various outlets and their friends that trans people are X and Y and they must be protected, and anyone who says anything is to be shut down. And, you know, it's a very hard thing to fight in a way, isn't it?
Oh, it's impossible. When I stand, it's cute actually. I mean, I say it's cute because of the naivety. When I go and I speak before some, you know, parents or whatever out in the western part of the state, right? So the western part of the state is going to be more rural. It's going to be more like conservative, country people, common sense people, salt of the earth, right?
Yeah.
And so I go out there and I'm talking to them and they're like, wait a minute, these gender things that's happening out there, whatever. Why can't you just, you know, if you just stand up before the school board and you talk to them about biology and science? And I'm like, aw, you know.
Yeah. It's so cute.
Yeah. You really think that works? No, because I sat in on a Fairfax County committee. It was called the Family Life Education Curriculum Advisory Committee. And it had like 2 or 3 dozen people in it who were pulled from the community, you know, appointed by the school board. So they're all like ideologically a certain way. And lawyers and doctors and pastors or whatever. And they were sitting around deciding what's going to be in the family life, the sex education curriculum. And a lawyer who had just kind of took everything over. He was like, biological sex is essentially meaningless. And they decided to run with that. And that became a part of their whole thing, where it was going to be sex assigned at birth. And they changed all the terminology to go around that. Science didn't matter. There was like 2 sane people in that committee, and they read all the medical journals and all this, explanations about how, there's male and there's female, and here's how they're different. It didn't matter. It doesn't matter. You can have science on your side. It doesn't matter, because we're not dealing with science. We're dealing with like a religion at this point. You know what I mean?
This is what makes me so mad about what my party is doing, because we Democrats love to hate Republicans for science denial
yes.
in the climate context. We love it.
I know. I often say this. How can the Democrats fight on this issue, on the issue of climate change, if they have completely given up this issue, the issue of gender and sex, to like lunatics?
Because the medical community is going along with it. You've got the AMA and the APA and all these medical journals and all these, PhDs or whatever. And they're coming out and they're saying, well, sex is fluid. It's, and they just totally, using intersex individuals as like shields for this. So when you've got all the heavy hitters with all their acronyms behind their name, I mean, they're claiming they got science too. So that's how.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. It really is. I find it. If I'd known that I would be hitting 50 and be entering into a complete age of unreason, I would have been more frightened about it, because this is really one of the things I've always been scared of, which is idiocracy. Like the Democrats and the Republicans, there just seems to be a kind of a worship of. I think another reason that makes this so hard to talk about, or so hard to change minds on, is that a lot of people are thinking with their gut, and their gut can be right, but sometimes it's wrong. Sometimes it's like, your gut actually leads you the wrong way, and they are unable to think with, the correct part of their brain. It just seems like an age of kind of emotional unreason.
Yeah. And one thing I did just want to emphasize, when Natasha went to the meeting on Wednesday, right? So we went together on Tuesday. We were there for hours. We had the rally. We all testified and said our piece. And then they postponed the vote until Wednesday. And Natasha went to that meeting, and she stood in the room and held a sign that said, girls' rights or boys' feelings, pick one. And I love that sign. And that sign got picked up by the Washington Post, and it appeared in yesterday's Washington Post. And the reason I love that so much is that part of the ideological capture that we're seeing is the use of language. And Natasha's sign cut right through it. And millions of Americans are going to see that sign and know that if you're talking about boys, you can just say boys. Because people don't think they can do that. We're used to it, right? Like those of us who have been fighting this, I don't care what side of the political aisle you're on, those of us who have been fighting this, we just say boys when we mean boys. And so we're used to that. But the vast majority of Americans don't know that if you're talking about young adult males, you can just say boys. It's fine.
Yes. I think also a lot of people think that we're talking about transsexuals, when of course the rules seem to be different for boys. Boys can be fully intact and still call themselves trans, whereas, as always, girls get the dirty end of the stick, and they have to have double mastectomies and all this kind of body hating stuff. It's just a terrible deal for girls all around.
It is.
I'm sorry. Anyway, I know you know this. Can I just ask, what are you going to do next about Loudoun? Is there anything to be done, or is that fight over?
So, I've got a reputation in my county of fighting every single battle that's a losing battle, right? I see it as we're going up that hill, and I'm all alone, or I'll have a small group, and I'm going to face a battle of a million, and I know I'm going to lose, but I do it anyway. So one of the things that I did this summer, because I realized I try to be ahead of the curve, right? So I was screaming about this gender identity stuff here years ago. And now I'm screaming about something called school choice, because at some point it's like, sorry guys, like we need a divorce, and at this point, what I did is I opened up a political action committee called Virginia for Educational Freedom. And it's like nonpartisan. I go equal opportunity attack here, and I'll go after Republicans and Democrats. I don't care. And basically what I want is where educational funds follow the kids, right? And so this is basically what I'm working on, is trying to pressure politicians and their candidates to sign school choice pledges and to introduce school choice legislation, to sponsor it, to vote for it, and maybe even like work on a constitutional amendment to make school choice easier in Virginia. We have kind of a irritating clause about public education in there. And that way, you know what, instead of my Loudoun County Public Schools and the radicals in charge of it getting all that money, and I mean, it's like $15,000 per student per year. Yeah, they got all that money even when the kids were distance learning and learning loss last year, and they were stuck at home, and it was just a crazy mess. They got all that money anyway. So I would kind of like that money to go to the parents, and the parents say, they can go where they want. And if you want your kid to go to a rainbow school, go to a rainbow school. And if you want your kid to go to private school or have a tutor or homeschool pod or whatever they do, then parents really are empowered, because there are so many like single moms out there who wish that they could pull their kids out, but they can't because they have to work 2 jobs, and, they can't afford a private school, and they can't be driving their kid. You know what I mean? They can't homeschool. And so it's just, anyway, that's my next goal. Is that
what's so interesting about this is I used to be a huge proponent of public education. I definitely would toe the party line, the Democratic Party line, about the importance of public education. I went to public schools. I got a great education in public schools, and I'm so grateful for that. And I think, Natasha, it's okay to say here that you did pull your kids from Loudoun County Public Schools.
Oh yeah, in August. I saw the writing on the wall. Everything was going nuts with everything, all the policy changes. I said, I'm done, and I put my money where my mouth was. But I know that some people can't do that. Do you know what I mean?
So now I would join Natasha in this fight, because public schools have been so corrupted by this gender nonsense. And I have an email in my inbox today from a woman in a neighboring county. She saw my blog on Loudoun County, and she said the same thing is happening in my county with no public input. I mean, say what you will about the Loudoun County Public Schools meeting that we attended on Tuesday, which was awful and draconian and intimidating and terrible. But she's telling me that this policy just passed, literally just passed last night, the 12th of August, with no public input. She's saying that she is the sole income earner in her family, and she's got 2 kids in school. She would pull them if she could, but she can't. So she's tearing her hair out. She doesn't feel like she could speak out, even if she had an opportunity to, because she'll lose her job. So she's sort of pleading with me to, I don't know what I'm going to do. I just got this email about an hour ago, but it's terrible. So I say all that to say, I used to be a huge proponent of public education, and I still stand by the principles behind public education. But what's going on in our public schools today is just disgusting. And so even though I don't live in Virginia, I would be happy to support Natasha and what she's doing.
Well, I'm exactly the same way. And Natasha, I hate to say it, but in the old days, I used to think homeschooling was a sign of craziness, crazy people, because I thought that
are a little crazy.
But I thought, this was at a time when it seemed to me that the attacks on Democrats were coming from a place of irrationality and silliness and Trump's like kind of reflexive lying. It just like it seemed that the Republicans were the party of craziness and mad people and saying crazy things and mad beliefs. But now the Democrats have completely taken that crown from the Republicans. I don't hear nearly the same kind of insanity from the Republicans as I do from Democrats on this. And I'll tell you another interesting thing. You may not know about this, Natasha. It depends on how up to speed you are with what's been happening in the UK. But the thing that Cara just described is absolute playbook stuff. There was a document called the Denton's document, which was a top legal firm in the UK. And I'll send you the links. They discussed how to pass unpopular ideas without any trouble, and they had all these kinds of advice like. Attach it to a popular idea. So in Ireland, for instance, self-ID came in on the back of marriage equality because everyone was very much in favor of gay people getting married. But what they didn't know is they were also opening the door to men in women's prisons and stuff like that because they attached it to marriage equality.
Like a leech. They
like a leech.
Parasites onto stuff. Oh.
It is the most cynical thing.
It is in our infrastructure bill, which the Senate just passed the other day. This is supposed to be an infrastructure bill that President Biden has been pushing, and he has sold Democrats on improving roads, improving bridges, providing emergency services, and those are things we all want. We all want those things, and in comes gender identity right through the back door. And 19 Republicans, Natasha, I don't know if you know this, 19 Republicans.
Oh, I know. I hammered them on Facebook about it. Like I said, I'm an equal opportunity attacker here. And, I see this locally, Loudoun County, when we have something called the Minority Student Achievement Advisory Committee or something like that. MSAC is what we call it. And they're kind of like a committee, kind of somehow like a sister committee is school board, and they advise the school board, right, on minority issues. When you hear minority, you think immigrants, you think racial minorities, right? Maybe disabled students. I don't know, but there's also a special education committee, so that's for them. But the point is, that's what you think, right? And I remember this. It was 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half ago, and they were putting out this notice that they were. They had some room, like some seats on their board that they needed to have filled. And Equality Loudoun, okay, the big rainbow pushers of all things gender glitter, said, "Ooh, guys, there's some openings." And they immediately put on there a local mother who's transing at least one or two kids of hers. And she was put on that board. And so all of a sudden, MSAC started pushing the LGBTQ plus LMNOP stuff. Yeah. And they basically just hooked their, trailer to that wagon. And so now when these, Black parents are concerned about their kids being, racially discriminated against or not getting a proper education, and now they're like towing this baggage behind them. But that's what they do. They hitch their bandwagon onto other, what you would think are noble causes, like parasites. And it's very.
So now, do Black parents have trouble getting protection for their kids on the basis of race because it's been totally taken over by gender?
I don't know. I think, although I'm going to tell you something, there's been all this critical race theory stuff going on where parents have been rallying against it, and you'd have 200 parents show up or 100 parents show up to go parents against critical race theory, right? Because they don't like any of these teachings. And there are maybe a handful, I'm talking a handful of people that would show up from the other side to the school board meetings in terms of at the rallies with their BLM signs, and they're all white women.
Right.
And because at the same time, they're all wearing rainbows and pushing the purple gender nonsense. And so it's almost like, I don't know. I wonder how many feel like they don't want to be associated. I'm not really sure, because I'll tell you, Kara, I told you about this when we were standing outside in that crazy weather. When I first started this gender fight 2 years ago, and I was speaking before the school board, there was a Black mother who was standing next to me, and she was there on some racial issues because some crazy stuff had been going on at some local school, and it hit the headlines. And so she was there about that. And she was listening to us talk, and she says, about girls' bathroom rights and all that kind of stuff. She says, my son is gay, and I really, I support him, but I don't want him in my daughter's bathroom. And so she's sitting here torn, whoa. She didn't have any idea that this debate was going on. And, most people think, oh, LGBT rights, gay rights. They just think about protecting kids from being bullied because they want to, dress or act a certain way. But in reality, it all comes down to access and forced validation and forced speech and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, I don't know. I can't speak for Black people in terms of.
Well, it's an interesting thing because something similar, a similar dynamic played out in, I think it was Birmingham, where there were a lot of Muslim parents who, you know, some of whom were homophobic, but I wonder how many were actually worried about, you know, the alphabet being tied onto LGB, because after B, it really could mean anything. You know.
Oh yeah.
And it often means straight, you know, but straight
with extra steps. Yeah.
Straight with extra steps. Straight with lip gloss, you know. Straight with black eyeshadow. Sorry. So yes. So I would imagine that, you know, it's hard for parents to enter into this debate because, as you say, that guy who was at the meeting shouting homophobe at Linda Bellos, it's a completely confusing debate because of these people and because of the way that these issues have been conflated. You know, again, I have no question. I'm so sorry.
No, okay. It's really true. For a while, I had a job working for a city agency in DC. So I was working for the city. And I had this orientation the first day, and most of it was very stereotypical stuff, anti-discrimination stuff. It was very standard, traditional orientation stuff for employment. And then this guy came in, and he did something very interesting. He did his job, first of all, which was talk about how DC law prohibits discrimination on the basis of gender identity. It does. That's our local law. So what he did, and he was very clearly a man who knew he was a man. There wasn't anything like that going on. But what he said, he was the trainer, and he said, I can go into any women's bathroom in any government property looking just like this, and that is legal. And there was a Black woman in the back of the room who stood up and she said, oh, hell no.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting to see how these kinds of issues play out, because Natasha's totally right? Like all of these groups and causes that sound very good and helpful and moral just attach the gender stuff onto them. And it's just really bad.
Yeah. Well, again, this is all in the Denton's document, which I will put at the bottom of the video so that you can check it out. I think it's worth possibly forewarning other places. I don't know whether you have parents groups set up or something like that, but it would be worth sharing with them because it just shows all the tactics, you know. I think that's all I have time for today. I'm going to have to head out in a second, do family stuff. But would it be possible to get you back on if there are any more kind of developments in all this, and speak to you again, because it's really great to talk to you.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
I ain't going
Don't be too enthusiastic. My God.
No, it would be lovely. Actually, it's been a good conversation. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Good. Well, it's been lovely having you, and you know, well done for being the one person running up that, or the two people running up that hill with a flag. There's not many of us, but you know, it's reassuring that such strong people are you know, on the right side of things. So, well done.
Can I say a quick thing before we go?
Yes, absolutely, Cara.
I was just very grateful to Natasha, first of all, for inviting me to the rally.
Thank you for coming.
And it was an opportunity to tell a overwhelmingly conservative audience that there are countless Democrats all over the United States who are furious at our own party leadership, because I want them to know that. I really want conservatives to know that there are countless Democrats who are really furious because the media won't platform us.
Oh,
the
yeah.
second thing I really want to thank Natasha for is the way that she introduced me, which was to tell a bunch of her own people. She said, all right, she basically said, look, Republicans, stop saying, where are the feminists?
Yeah, absolutely. That was great.
Oh my gosh, they do it all the time. Comments on Facebook, like, where are the feminists on this issue? And I'm like,
also tell them they're in the UK.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely.
Thank you so much. Sorry, no, that sounded terrible. There's so many brilliant women in America fighting back. It's great to see, and you know, again, I'm just very proud to be, you know, on your side on this, because it's disgraceful what's happening.
Thanks so much, Graham.
come back and tell us where the next Flashpoint is, Cara. I hope you turn up there as well. And Natasha, best of luck with your fight.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I'll just end it here, but stick around and we'll just say goodbye afterwards. Bye-bye.